This video is an overview of the Toro box, which is an RGB and VGA box for the Dreamcast made by the Behar Bros. It offers SCART and VGA outputs as well as a number of different features. And while I already have a page dedicated to it on the website, I really felt like a video could show off all of its features. So let me pop this thing open and show you guys what's inside. With the top off, I'm able to show off each individual feature of the Toro. So I'll show more when hooked up to actual monitors, but the basics are, this switch goes between RGB and VGA mode, and this should only be toggled when the Dreamcast is off, never on, because it needs to be booted into the proper modes. The next switch is for even and odd scan lines, which I'll demonstrate in a moment, and it also acts as a brightness gamma control. This is for the width of the scan lines, and this is just scan lines on and off. The great feature about the Toro is it actually supports dual outputs, both SCART and VGA. And it also has a built-in sync combiner circuit. So when in the top mode, it's in VGA, RGB HV, which is just your standard VGA output, which will not work with most SCART connectors. When it's down, it's in RGB S mode, which is your standard SCART out for anything from anything that SCART will accept, including the FrameMeister, any upscalers that normally use it, or even the G-SCART switch. And also, audio is output through both these RCA connectors, as well as the SCART, both at the same time. One bonus feature of the Toro is that with an adapter cable, you could actually hook this up to any VGA source. I believe the adapter is only $5, and anything that's outputting 480p could go right through this and add scan lines to it. I believe it'll work with higher signals, but the scan lines won't look right. I actually use this solution in conjunction with a component to VGA converter to use with my Nintendo Wii, and I was able to add scan lines and have it look really great. So I wouldn't buy the Toro just to have this extra feature, but if you wanted an awesome Dreamcast box, the fact that with just a $5 adapter you could now have a dual purpose box out of it, that I think it's a really great addition. Also, because the connector comes in from the side, you don't need to remove the top in order to get to it. Some of their older versions, actually, you had to plug it in from the top and then put the casing back on, but this one could just slide right in and out from the side. I wanted to take a second just to demonstrate both the dual output capability as well as the sync combiner button inside it. So as you can see, it's in RGB mode, outputting to both monitors at the same time, although this works with VGA as well. And I have it going out of the SCART and VGA ports, but each converter is going directly into the BBM. That's not run through anything else at all. And the sync combiner circuit is down. Well, the button's down, which means this sync combiner is working, so it's outputting RGB S. Let me just demonstrate real quick what would happen when you toggle it. So, although I don't recommend this at all, I'm just kind of sticking a screwdriver in to hit the toggle button. Obviously, you could short something out by doing this. I would just take the top off, but just by releasing it, now it's in RGB HV mode, and neither monitor will be able to handle it. This is good if you're using it into an actual VGA monitor or to a flat screen that expects RGB HV, but once you get it in there, here we go, and get the button down, now that turns the sync combiner circuit back on, and everything's working perfectly. So generally speaking, you would only use RGB HV mode, which is the button in the up position, if you were going directly into a VGA monitor or a newer flat screen that accepts a VGA signal. Otherwise, you'd most likely want an RGB S signal, meaning the button down. FrameMeister users would definitely want that, just using the SCART connector. That way you could go right through a switch or directly into a female SCART adapter. And even people with PVMs who just want to use a VGA to BNC cable, like this one, to go directly into their PVM, that would generally be the best way to do it. The only scenario where this wouldn't work is if you're going out to an RGB monitor or FrameMeister through this connector, and then out to a capture card through the VGA, which might only accept an RGB HV signal. I don't run into that problem. My PDX USB 3 HD cap, I probably said that wrong, but I'll go SCART into my PVM, and then I'll just go RGBS via VGA directly into that capture card, and it works perfectly. So that would be the only weird scenario, is if you're using one device that requires RGB HV and another device that requires RGBS, and that's when you would need something like an Extron RXI device. So I'll show the Toro using VGA out directly into my 1080p plasma. The first thing you should know is that most TVs you're going to have to use the zoom function to put it to 4:3 mode, otherwise it'll be stretched across the screen like that. My TV is just a button, so it's actually pretty easy. And then I guess I'll just go through the different features, and I'll start with scan lines on and off. So they look pretty good in the normal width mode. I would describe them as 480p looking scan lines, so not as thick. You can go to the thicker scan lines, but I just don't think it looks as clear for this. Maybe it's just because I'm used to seeing games like this in 480p, but I would recommend the normal width of them. And then of course, even and odd, you could actually, you can see on the D from Daytona, if you move it to odd, it drops the scan lines down by 1. So in even mode is when it normally looks fine, but if it ever gets off for whatever reason, you could just flip that switch. And then one of the other features is if you turn the scan lines off, even odd becomes a brightness switch, which I'm not really sure why this is, why it does it like this. I mean, you'd have to have the scan line on off, and then this just becomes the, I think it's really designed for video processors, but I would just leave it always in the even position because it looks perfect on my TV. I wanted to use my Sony BVM to demonstrate the CRT usage since it accepts all of the resolutions that the Dreamcast outputs. So I have the Toro hooked up via a SCART cable directly into the G-SCART switch, which then goes out with the VGA cable to VGA to BNC inside the Sony BVM monitor. And all the other toggle switches should pretty much be off. I mean, you can turn on scan lines, but they're really not going to look great on a CRT, and you're pretty much just adding noise. Same with that other switch that controls brightness. I would just leave everything off. But VGA looks amazing on this. 480p is absolutely crisp and clear, and I want to show off RGB now as well. When switched into RGB mode, you're allowed to use 480i and 240p modes. This is Gunlord in 240p, and it looks absolutely awesome. Absolutely crisp, one of the best 240p images you could get. There are a few other issues though with RGB mode in the Dreamcast, most specifically with games that aren't compatible with RGB, so I'll show that one next. So one strange issue are games that just aren't compatible with the RGB mode at all. And to make things weirder, if you were to just use the Dreamcast composite or S-video cables, they'll work fine. It's only when you're in RGB mode with a SCART cable or with one of these boxes does it not work. So I'll turn up the volume on the speaker so you can see. This is Street Fighter Third Strike, and you should even be able to see it pop up on the little VMU module in a second, but you won't be able to see it on the screen. So you can hear it in the background, you can see it on this, but nothing on the screen at all. Luckily, you're able to get patched ISOs that support RGB mode for almost every one of these games. So as you can see, it's the same game, Third Strike, but now I downloaded a patched ISO that lets you play it through RGB mode. This one happens to be in 480i, so you can see a bit of the interlaced flicker, but at least the game works, and at least you can still use the highest possible quality with it, and don't have to worry about trying to play in composite video or anything like that. So it's pretty hard to take video of a CRT, so I'm sorry if any of this isn't coming out right, but I'll try my best, at least show that it's possible to work. But as you can see, overall the Toro is pretty much everything you could imagine for the Dreamcast as far as video outputs go. Other than a direct digital to digital HDMI mod, I really don't think I would need anything else for it, and that's why I always recommend it as the solution for the Dreamcast, because whether you use SCART, VGA, or anything in between, this should be compatible with it. So hopefully that was good enough, and let me know what you guys think in the comments. One last quick tip. If you're using the Hanzo or the Kuro, the other two Behar Bros boxes that are for Dreamcast, they don't have a SCART output, they only have VGA, and I believe it's only RGB HV outputs. So your choices would be to buy their Kenzie, which is the actual sync combiner box, or just to get an Extron RXI box. I'm a big fan of the 203 RXI because you could have your G-SCART switch going into input 1, your Dreamcast going into input 2, and then leave 3 open, and this will output anything you'd like. So if you just want RGBS, all you have to do is just simply connect the RGBS outputs and nothing else, and it'll automatically send that to your PVM or capture card. So this is a great solution, and this is also the same thing that I use for the Sync on Green with PlayStation 2, so I just figured that would be a quick tip to add.